What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. In a recent Ask Riot post, the same one where they actually announced voice chat, Riot was talking about the support role in general and the changes they wanted to make to it. Support players make up probably the smallest group of players of any particular role in League of Legends, and a lot of that comes down to just what people find fun about playing League of Legends. There's a few issues that really put people off of learning and enjoying the support role, such as item balance, experience, and gold issues, and kind of your ability to make solo plays, and Riot really wants to find a way to fix as many of those issues as possible, and to encourage more people to give support a shot, but without redesigning the support role completely and affecting current support players. The Ask Riot post on that topic was pretty overshadowed by the dynamic queue announcement and the update on voice chat, but it still has some really good and interesting information about what we can expect from the support role in the future. So that's what we're taking a look at today, and if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button, and if you don't, definitely hit that dislike. Now the first thing that Riot mentioned that they want to improve on to make supporting more fun was to fix experience gain. The problem is that because supports have to share experience the entire game but also roam around and help other teammates, they often end up behind on both experience and levels. And this means that they are weaker and a lot more likely to die, which ends up causing an even bigger level gap at the end of the day. And to compensate, Riot wants to find a way to get more experience onto supports. Probably the most obvious way to do this would be to just increase the shared minion experience, but something that is a little bit more interesting that I'd really like to see Riot do is to give support items an increase in experience given from lane creeps. We've seen them use this design to give bonus experience to junglers through killing jungle camps, so Riot definitely does seem at least a little bit comfortable with this type of solution, and it's potentially likely going to be how they might implement an experience gain fix for supports. It's definitely the way I'd like to see it done, at least. Hopefully this will keep supports closer on the level to the rest of the team, helping them stay useful and not punishing players for roaming and trying to get vision control. Items as well are a big problem for support players because a lot of the times there's just really not that much incentive to build any of them. Certain support items totally outshine others, leaving items like Ancient Coin, Ruby Sightstone, and Forbidden Idol just left behind in the dust. They don't feel rewarding at all to build, so Riot definitely wants to look into buffing them to help them make worth picking up in future patches. This should also help increase the variety in supports being played if these changes benefit them too. There's quite a few champions that kind of just don't see play in the support role because items like Ancient Coin aren't as strong as their counterparts. So a good buff might really help introduce some of the more off-meta champions back into relevancy once again. And this also lines up really well with Riot's next goal, which is to properly balance support champions themselves. Recently released support champions have been so much more popular because they're a lot less linear, they're a lot more interesting and exciting to play as well. Champions like Thresh and Bard have much more impactful and complex abilities and kits overall, and champions like those have really helped get more people interested in playing support. But Riot wants to take this a little bit further though, so they'll be looking to buff weaker supports, nerf the meta dominant ones, and help make those linear champions a little bit more interesting to play. Most notably, they listed Thresh as an example of a champion that, while being really fun to play, was probably a little bit on the weak side, so he's likely getting a buff. And they also mentioned a support like Blitzcrank, who's kind of just so powerful in the right hands that it's not really worth picking anyone else in that situation, so he's probably getting a nerf. Sometimes it's hard to feel like you're making a difference as a support, so giving some more playmaking ability to support players will do a lot to make support more fun to play. The other big issue that Riot mentioned as something really hurting supports was actually the power of the Teleport Summoner spell. The ability to jump across the map in just a matter of seconds is incredibly powerful, and Teleport has been a huge part of the competitive as well as the solo queue metagames because of it. A lot of the early teleport plays are just aimed at bot lane because it's much easier, and honestly it's just better to teleport for 2 kills, and this means it's quite difficult to play your lane in a 2v2 scenario and make interesting plays that are fun when the entire enemy team can just show up out of nowhere. Riot's comments on teleport made it pretty likely that we'll see quite a few changes to the ability. On the PvE currently, there's an increase on its channel time to give players more time to react, as well as more obvious animations so that you're not going to miss seeing it happen accidentally. Teleporting won't put you in a random position anymore either, you're always going to be placed on the side of the objective you teleported to that is closest to your friendly nexus, which is actually a huge change that's going to make it a lot easier for teams to play around where a champion is going to appear, whether for an ally or an enemy. The last thing Riot mentioned in this particular post was that they were aware of the current issues with the champion mastery system and the support role. It seems to be way more difficult, almost impossible sometimes, to get an S or an S+ grade as a support, and part of this just has to do with the way that roles are evaluated. With other lanes, the champion mastery system can look at loads of different statistics to work out your performance, your KDA, CS, gold, and loads more. As a ward, it's way more difficult. Wards placed, for example, is not a great way to separate the great performances from just the good ones. At least this means we can expect some changes and updates in the future to smooth out the grading of games played as a support, which is really cool and definitely something to look forward to. And that pretty much wraps up the comments made on the upcoming support changes, so next up let's take a look at actually the changes that are currently being implemented on the PBE to get a little bit more of an insight into the future of what exactly Riot intends to do with this. So first on our list we have the experience changes. Now the current experience system uses what's called a rubber band feature that kicks in when you are really far behind, 4 levels behind the average level on the enemy team to be exact, at least right now, which yes is definitely quite extreme, meaning that being behind a few levels is really difficult to deal with, but being behind so far, 4 levels behind, kicks the system into hyperdrive and it becomes easier to catch up. So that sort of pattern is honestly kind of weird. And smoothing this out should really help with teams that are not only struggling with being behind, but also support champions that are struggling with being underleveled. Riot is also experimenting with reducing the experience from kills in the first 9 levels, especially on levels 1, 2, and 3. This is going to make dying in lane early on a little bit less punishing, and means you stand more of a chance when getting back to lane, and will probably make games, at least the early game, a lot less snowbally than they are at the moment. Riot Zephyrus mentioned that dying early was meant to punish players by making them miss experience and gold from the wave of creeps, but giving so much experience to the enemy laner was just totally compounding the effect to the point where it just generated such an insane lead. And dialing back on the experience given to the enemy champion isn't going to stop you from missing your experience from your creeps, but it does mean that you aren't doubling up on that disadvantage. The next change being tested is to the experience soak feature, where you currently need to have an assist on an enemy champion to gain experience when they are slain. The current change lets you soak experience from a champion death as long as you were involved in under 10 seconds, which means although you might not get gold for an assist, you should still get some experience for doing some sort of part. The problem was that sacrificial plays where you swing a fight for your team but just die in the process sometimes meant that you just couldn't hit every enemy recently enough to get some experience for your trouble, which means that the rest of your team gets a bunch of experience and you're left out, putting you further behind compared to your team and the opponents and making those plays harder to pull off the next time around. And the last update to experience will be especially awesome for support players, which is an experience reward given for destroying wards. Currently, blue trinket wards will give 15 experience, and regular wards and pink wards will give 30 experience. This should give a nice incentive to seek out enemy wards, as well as rewarding diligent support players, helping them stay even in levels with the rest of their team. There's a whole bunch of interesting support balance changes on the PBE at the moment as well that look pretty promising, aiming at buffing the weaker supports that aren't seeing play, as well as taking power away from some of the more game-changing ones. The first change is to Blitzcrank, giving his current 30-second ultimate cooldown at all ranks to a 60, 40, and 20-second cooldown as he ranks it up. His ultimate gives him a lot of burst and wave clear at the moment, so this change should help make it a little less powerful early on, but potentially more effective in the late game too. Blitzcrank's power is mostly in his rocket grab anyway, so dialing down on his ultimate is a very fair way to balance him out. Next up we have Leona, who's actually looking to potentially receive a ton of changes. Now of course these changes are experimental, but the PBE does have somewhat of a consistent schedule when it comes to those changes making it to the live, and Leona is one of those supports that's been a staple for a long time but has really suffered since the more fun and interesting playmaking supports have been introduced into the game. These changes should make her a little bit more proactive, as well as giving her ways to affect a game when her abilities are on cooldown. At the moment, these changes include a reduced cooldown to her Q stun, a slight damage scaling buff on her W shield, and a longer root duration on her Zenith blade. She's also taking a hit to her ultimate damage but getting a new ability to keep her busy. If she hits an enemy with her ultimate, she'll gain a buff called Incandescence that will increase her attack range and give bonus magic damage on attacks for her next 3 attacks. And this is great because Leona's pretty useless after using her engage combo, so now she can contribute to a fight a little bit more and use her crowd control more reliably. Lulu's also being targeted for changes that will give her a more supportive playstyle. Along with a movement speed and base mana buff, Glitter Lance will have its slow change to 2 seconds at all rank, along with a buff to the AP scaling, but it's now going to deal only 70% damage to targets beyond the first one hit. So it's going to be much weaker as a wave clearing tool, which should help keep mid and top lane Lulu in check at the expense of buffing support Lulu. Her Whimsy will also now give bonus attack speed to an ally to help out in early trades, and these changes will help Lulu regain her status as an aggressive support that wants to bully enemy laners early on. Sona also has quite a number of changes too. The big one is to her ultimate that will now passively reduce her other ability cooldowns by 20, 30, or 40% based on rank, letting her spam them even more often without having to pick up any cooldown reduction in items. Her auras will have slightly more range, and her basic abilities are looking to be readjusted too. Q will deal more damage at ranks past level 1, W will give more healing but no bonus health scaling to lower health allies, and her E will now give bonus attack range rather than a movement speed debuff on her next power chord. There's also a couple of minor changes that's going to affect the support role. You got Thresh's W's getting a slight buff, letting the shield strength from his lantern scale with his souls rather than his ability power. Zyra's also on the chopping block for a small nerf, raising the recharge time on her W slightly early on, but buffing it a little at max rank, and that should help her be a little bit less annoying to deal with in lane, but means that she gets more chances to use her plants effectively in the late game. And last but not least are the current changes to the items on the PBE. Ancient Coin and Nomad's Medallion are going to give some cooldown reduction, with Nomad's Medallion also giving way more mana regen, but a little bit less health regen. Talisman of Ascension is getting a huge buff. It'll now cost more but build out of Raptor's Cloak, giving it the Point Runner active and 45 armor as well. It gives 25% less mana regen than it did, but gives also 50% more health regen. But that 45 armor, oh man, that's going to be sweet. Forbidden Idols also gaining a passive that gives a 10% buff to shields and healing, but it'll cost more to compensate. And this effect will also roll over into the items that it builds into, Mikhail's Crucible and Ardent Censer. They're going to cost more as well, but give 15% increased shielding and healing power buffs. Ardent Censer is also going to give 20 more ability power, but it will be losing half of its mana regen bonus. Ruby Sightstone also has an awesome buff on the PBE, lowering its overall cost by 200 gold, but also giving a 20% cooldown reduction to activatable items specifically. The two last important tweaks worth noting are to Spell Thief's Edge and to Boots Mobility, and those changes should make all support players really happy. Killing wards will no longer disable the Boots of Mobility move speed buff, and killing Zyra plants or other non-lane minions will no longer disable the Spell Thief's Edge passive, so those are some nice quality of life improvements for those items. Now, the really exciting part for me about these support changes is that they look pretty likely to make more players give the support role a chance. Helping to increase the support player base was actually going to do wonders for the game overall, and will really help deal with the issues in dynamic queue actually at the moment. One of the big reasons queue timers are so long in dynamic queue is because people just don't want to play support. And these changes look like a really promising way to help fix that issue. We'd love to hear your opinions on the changes on the PB so far, so make sure you let us know, or perhaps even suggest your own. That's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.